So this piece has a dedication at the top of the title page.
Right.
Would you tell us about that?
Yes, you bet. It's dedicated to Hank Marr. Hank Marr was my colleague at Ohio State. In fact, he was my neighbor. His studio was right next to mine for a while. And Hank's specialty was keyboards and jazz. And he played the Hammond B3 organ and may have been the guy, if I understand it correctly, that brought the Hammond B3 back into prominence in the jazz field. So one day I wandered into his studio because I was aware that our students were not really conversant with jazz and improvisation. It was in the 90s when I did this. And I said, well, how can I get started, you know? And immediately, you didn't have to think about it. He said, buy Jamie Aebersold's Volume 1, How to Play Jazz and Improvise. And I'd seen the books, you know, for years in music stores. I went and I bought one, and I was astonished because it was filled with all sorts of incredibly good information, a slightly different way of thinking about theory. That surprised me, especially in regards to notation of theory chords and stuff like that. And I discovered that I didn't know anything about blues scales, and I needed to practice them, so I started to. I started to practice them. I got familiar with blues progressions, for example. Okay. And after Hank died and I wrote this little piece, I thought, you know, I really need to dedicate this to him because I was grateful for those few minutes of collegiality, instruction, friendly help he gave me.
So compositionally, how then do you decide to write a piece, a blues piece for bassoon? Like what makes that something you would want it to do?
Well, first of all, the bassoon hasn't been prominent in jazz music. It is now, but it hasn't been. And there were a couple of threads. First of all, I had an opportunity to play as a soloist with the concert band at Ohio State. And I wanted to write my own piece because there wasn't much in the repertoire. And it wasn't difficult to write this, to compose it, because I based it on blues progression, which gives you a structure immediately. And I wanted to cast the bassoon as almost an imposter in this kind of solo. Here's the stuffy symphony bassoon player dipping his toe in the water of the blues, you know, see what it's like. Is it too hot for me? You know, if it's too hot, I can withdraw my toe and not get in. and that was, so the piece is rather conservative attempt to write a little bit of bluesy stuff for the bassoon. The bassoon, I think, is a very good blues instrument because it's got this kind of yearning quality, and composers in the past have always used it in a rather reflective and meditative way. And that was my approach with the piece, with this piece. And the other part of it was that I wanted to support bassoon solo with band, because there wasn't much. So I think it's a good piece to do the missionary work we need to do to convince young people to play the bassoon.
That's good. That's good. So I know when I was younger, high school, I certainly wasn't aware of anybody playing jazz bassoon. Mm-hmm. And obviously that has changed a lot.
It sure has, yes.
Do you have jazz bassoonists that you like or have listened to that you would recommend people kind of look up and if they're interested in that sort of thing, or is that something that?
Well, I do listen to jazz bassoonists. I think, is it Ray Pitsey in Los Angeles, who is a good friend of my colleague Alan Goodman, has told me some wonderful stories about Ray Pitsey. Jerry Benowitz, who was a colleague of mine back in New York, he played jazz on the bassoon. And there are a couple of others. Illinois Jacquette played the bassoon. I don't know if you knew that, but he was, of course, a great sax player. And he had a bassoon, a very fine instrument. And there's a picture of him playing the bassoon that was in the New York Times one time. I think I've got a copy of it at home.
That's awesome.
Imagine that.
So it exists. It's out there. I mean, I think probably students in high school don't necessarily know that.
Right.
That it exists.
Right, they probably don't.
It's a
Yeah.
thing.
The problem for the bassoon, of course, in jazz is it's not loud enough.
Right.
So it needs to be mic'd, and I think all the jazz players now use some sort of amplification process, and either attached to the vocal or close micing or something like that.
Sure.
Because it can't hold its own in a noisy club. You know, it really can't.
Sure.
But there are some really serious players that do this stuff now, and it's wonderful. I'm all for it. I think it's great. One of the things that I learned when I started to work on the Ebersold book is how very different the training, the technical training is for a jazz musician than for a classical musician. And I'm not sure that I'm right about this, but my sense is that the jazz musician is encouraged to play and express immediately. Okay, kid, I'm going to show you 2 or 3 notes, and then I want you to swing. You know, I'm being a little bit, perhaps, naive about this. Whereas the classical musician, you're not allowed to be an artist until you complete technical control. You know, and I find that that's deleterious to our development.
Sure.
We don't encourage our classically trained musicians to phrase, for example. You know, to really play what's in their heart, rather than, oh, no, I gotta practice, I gotta be 26 before I can express myself, which is, it's silly.
Right.
It's wasteful, too.
Well, I thank you for the piece, because
I'm glad
it's
you
been a
like
lot of fun to work on. And I see that you have more pieces on the OME list.
Yes.
So that's kind of nice. Is that kind of exciting for you to know that people are playing your pieces? Is that, as a composer?
Yeah, I'm moving into a new phase in my career. I'm downplaying the performing part and spending a lot more time writing, arranging, working on my publications. And it's fun, and I'm really looking forward to that aspect of creativity in music.
Well, thank you. And thanks for coming today. I really
Well,
appreciate
thank you, Bill. This is a great opportunity for me. I appreciate it.
Thank you.